Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Podcast by Army podcast, where we talk about BTS, Army, fandom, and research. We are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Ringland and
Jhertau Her, a university researcher.
And today we have a couple of topics that we're gonna chat about.
It's gonna be fun, honestly, because I am someone who's been in fandom for a long time, so this is exciting because I've been following these for a long time. But the Arc of Our Own ship stats for 2024 have been released. These are created by Center of These Lights, who is a longtime fandom community member. They do a lot of archival work, and it's really cool to see throughout the years this kind of accumulating. I think this is what iteration of this? Yeah, this has been going on for 11 plus years. It's really exciting because I remember reading these before I retired from fandom back in the day, because I used to be really interested in ship statistics and fandom statistics. There's some graphics online, if you look at, might have been made by me, but back in the day. But it's super excited. So we're gonna talk about this, talk about some creative works, talk about a bunch of different things, and have a joyful time talking about ship statistics, even though there's a lot of discourse throughout them, which we'll talk about also. So, where's BTS on the ship statistics? Our little Jungkook and Tae, they are number 43 on the ship list this year, which is 7 spots down from where they were last year. And then, at number 77 on the list, there's a re-entry of Jungkook and Jimin. On the top 100 of AO3 ship stats, there's only Taekook and Jikook, which is to be expected, as they're the two most popular ships in the fandom. And I just totally forgot. We should talk about RPF real quick. Disclaimer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we talk about these statistics, we're talking about fan fiction. Of course, we have to acknowledge that this is real person fan fiction. Some people aren't comfortable with real person fiction, which also has the acronym RPF. Some people are fine with it. Some people aren't. Kate and I were both fine with it. My kind of thesis on it is that fan works are separate from the actual celebrity themselves. The real bad thing is when people try to shove the fan fiction into the celebrity's face, or the celebrity isn't media trained to not look up fan fiction or fan works of themselves. A lot of media companies and talent companies talk about this, where they media train their celebrities actually to never engage with fandom work because of, historically, if we're talking about it, there's a lot of weird things people write about when it comes to the celebrities with fan fiction, which a lot of people have differing opinions on. I'm of the opinion where when someone's writing a fan fiction of a celebrity, they basically make that celebrity into a fictional character.
Yeah.
It's not actually the celebrity themselves, because what we see often in real person fan fiction is a creation of an archetype of the celebrity that is then written. And then the fanfic author kind of plays with that archetype, plays with different characterizations through the fictional medium.
Yeah. I think for me, it's especially, I don't know how I feel about RPF with other celebrities, but I have different feelings about it with BTS specifically because, one, they've engaged in their own fan fictional type play with their own, with HYYH, and there's like clearly characters of BTS already out in the universe made by them. And the fact that BTS have been very clear about their personas versus their characters versus their real selves, I think there's a lot of layers there. And so when I think of fan fiction and when I think of BTS fan fiction, I'm not thinking of the real people celebrities. I'm thinking about all those other layers of characters that are happening in our community.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. I also talk a lot about the separation between artists, celebrity, real person, and their fandom. And there's differing opinions on this. For example, in YouTuber fandoms, specifically Minecraft YouTuber fandoms, sometimes those Minecraft YouTubers explicitly say they don't want fanfiction written of them. Yet I have more of a fandom centered perspective, which a lot of people do not like for valid reasons. Where even if a celebrity says they don't want fanfiction written of them, they can't stop that fanfiction from being written of them. Because the fandom is like a separate community from the actual person themselves. Even if they are the reason that community has been created, has spurned on, has existed, the fandom has its own rules, has its own practices, has its own culture that is separate from the celebrity or the real person themselves.
Yeah. I was just gonna say it's really interesting with BTS because there are sub communities that are certainly separate, like sub army communities. But if you were to ask, just say an army on Twitter, they'd probably have a very different opinion about the separation between the fandom community and the artist.
Yeah, and this is also like an ongoing conversation. I've been having this type of conversation for 10 years now. And really, what it comes down to is the very firm fact that artists, celebrities, public figures, they need to be separated from the fandom. Even though, of course, celebrities love their fans, there's a lot of like parasocial relationships going on there. But the fandom needs space to exist on its own as its own entity. Because when the fandom does not have, that's when a fandom will not produce anything on their own. We're talking right now about fan fiction. Fan fiction is what's called a transformative work. In addition to fan fiction, there's things like fan art, there's fan edits, both video and photo, there's fan crafts, and a variety of other transformative works that help maintain a fandom and help fans to engage with each other. And that's completely a fan thing. That's why things like fan conventions exist, because that's where fans go to interact with each other. Even though there's panels and signings and things from the actual main interest that people like and enjoy, there's like sometimes voice actors and actors who go to the conventions to talk with fans. The fan convention experience is centered around fans. And I think that's really important for people to talk about and think about. Of course, people will have differing opinions on this, and I'm welcome to hearing about that, especially people who don't like fan fiction or don't like creative depictions of real life celebrities. And my big question to that, and something to challenge you in thinking about that, is okay, if you're not okay with fan fiction, are you okay with fan art? Are you okay with fan crafts? Like, how are you creating your lines and creating your perspective on what is a valid fan craft, a valid fan transformative work, and what is not? Because people make fan art of celebrities. People also make NSFW fan art of celebrities. If we want to throw it back really far, people have been writing essentially fan fiction of things like the Bible. A lot of stories and classical literature are riffs off of the Bible or of historical texts. The Odyssey is a riff, is a fictionalization of a lot of historical events that did happen during ancient Greece. So there's a lot of nuance in this type of conversation. I really challenge you to think through this type of thing because it is really interesting to think through and to read about as well. There's a lot of reading. We might link some in the description. I'll send some over and then we can link some. But it is really interesting to think about real person fiction and how we've come to create discourse around it. But yeah, Kate and I, we're both pretty much okay with it. So we're going to talk about it. If you're not comfortable with that, then this episode is probably something you should skip and you can come join us next week. Any thoughts about that, Kate, before I continue on?
Oh, that sounds good.
Slay. So back to AO3 ship stats and BTS. Oh, by the way, AO3, Archive of Our Own. Archive of Our Own is abbreviated to AO3 because Archive of Our Own. Of Our Own. 3 O's. So AO3, there's 3 O's. There you go. Congratulations. You now know why the abbreviation exists like that. Yeah. Just for the AO3 ship stats, I also wanted to talk about and give some context to the discourse around these ship stats because back in my day, but back in my day, there was not as much discourse around these ship stats than there are now. I used to run a lot of shipping accounts, so I would follow the ship stats and then post about them, obviously, and talk about them with other fans. But the way the discourse is developed around ship stats now in today's modern fandom era is so out of proportion. There's a lot of discourse around which types of ships are the top ships, right? Disproportionately, there are a lot of there's a lot of male x male M/ fanfics. There's a lot of white ships where both members of the ship are white. All of the main ships on the top 100 are all couples as well. There's no polycules, there's no thruples anywhere. And a lot of people have a lot of discourse around what's the top ship and what isn't. Right now, the top ship is Aziraphale and Crowley from Good Omens, the TV show specifically. And that is two white characters, two characters who are white, who are portrayed by white people in the TV show, and who are both, they're both technically not male. Like, their gender is very ambiguous within the show itself. They're played by two male presenting actors. And again, they're both characters created to be white. So there's a lot of discourse people have over, okay, we need more representation for ships that aren't white. We need more representation for ships that are like fem/, female x female. We need more representation for fanfics outside of Western media. When there is a lot of non-Western media up here, there's Bungo Stray Dogs, which is an anime. There's Jujutsu Kaisen, which is a manga / anime. There's Genshin Impact, there's My Hero Academia, my alma mater, there's Honkai Star Rail, there's One Piece. There's a lot of media that is outside of the Western space. But people have a lot of discourse over, oh, these ship stats are representative of the fandom community as a whole, when really they're not. Kate and I, we talked about this quantitative versus qualitative data, and this is all quantitative data.
Yeah, so this is just straight up scraping the statistics, right? It's just straight scraping what's on there.
Which is really easy to do, by the way. If you want to do that for any type of AO3 analysis, AO3 completely gives people free reign to do that.
Yes. But yeah, so there's no context in which what these fics are, how long they are. Like, could be 250 words, could be 250,000 words. There's no, this is straight up just counting at this point, right?
Yeah, and it's also a difference between the works gained and then the total amount of works in the actual fandom for that ship. For example, the top ship, Aziraphale and Crowley, they gained 14,000 works, but we don't know how long those works are. And to also give some additional context as well, Good Omens, the TV show, is based off of a book series. So there's already a lot of history there. I talk about this a lot with people in newer fandoms, where if you look at ship stats or anything like that, older fandoms will always have a advantage because they're just older.
Yeah.
This is why for BTS specifically, people are always talking about, like, oh, we don't have that many, like, we're not that high up on the AO3 ship stats this year. And a lot of people get really upset about that. Or they're like, oh, my favorite BTS ship isn't up there. And it's BTS Army, we're a really old fandom by fandom standards. We're like 10 plus years old. And because of that, we have a lot of works that have accumulated over a long time. And so we're not going to be out there creating a lot of works at once, right? On the AO3 ship stats, if we look at the statistics of the works gained and the total works, a lot of these fandoms are newer fandoms.
Yeah.
So newer fandoms, they get a big rush of people who create a lot of fiction, while older fandoms get a more consistent basis. This is not, Good Omens isn't a good example because they're just a community that writes a lot because they do a lot of...
Yeah, you think it's like the nature of the show and stuff. It's gonna...
Yeah, the nature of the show. A lot of iterations, a lot of... Yeah. There's a lot of work already within the show itself that kind of inspires fanfiction to be written, an alternative universe to be written. There's also things like Harry Potter, which... I
do think like so many Harry Potters are so high up on the lists, I'm surprised.
Oh, that's because the Harry Potter fandom has basically created their whole entire different universe outside of JKR. I think a lot of people don't have the context that the Harry Potter fandom is not based on the books anymore. They have their own, it's called fanon, like fan canon, that the whole entire fandom subscribes to and writes to now. JKR isn't even like a part of the fandom and what the fandom writes and what the fandom is involved in and cares about. So it's like, a lot of these on here, there is a lot of newer fandoms that just, like, for example, Hazbin Hotel came out as it's a cartoon, very popular right now. A lot of Hazbin Hotel ships are on here because they're new fandoms. So a lot of people are rushing to create fan fiction for the first time for this different type of content and media. But a lot of older fandoms, especially Army, especially, we can go into this a little bit, but especially Army, we have more consistent basis, and people also write for a lot of different ships in Army because we have a lot of different ships.
Yeah, it's interesting because you'll get the fanfic writers who are like, this is my ship. We're going down with this ship. And then you have the rest of fanfic writers who are all like, oh, what if we mix and match these or put these three together? Or anyway, so it's great.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on with the ship statistics. Specifically, maybe we should go into this as well, where Army, along with being an older fandom, there's a lot of Army sentiment now that is very anti-fanfic or anti-creative work, because Army has given way for a lot of things like streaming to be at the forefront of fan labor. And because of that, there are less fanfic authors doing BTS writing only. Kate we were talking about this before, like a lot of
a lot of the people that I had subscribed to 2020, 2021 when I was like first reading BTS fanfic, a lot of those folks have switched to other K-pop groups or other semi-related fandoms.
In 2020, a lot of people joined Army because Army was the biggest K-pop fandom. But now a lot of those people have branched off into other fandoms. A lot of people I've seen get into Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact. A lot of them have diverged into anime fandoms. People move around a lot.
Yeah. And I will say that I've seen a lot in kind of discussion about oh, what should I write for? A lot of folks have talked more recently about how just the interaction has gone down on AO3 and other places. And I think that I have seen that's true for me. There's just like less people commenting. There's just, people are still reading, like I'm still getting hits, but there's not that interaction piece. Like people just aren't bothering to interact. And there's certainly not nearly as much interaction in places like Twitter and stuff. Like it's much more subdued, shall we say. And so I think that is impacting people a lot, because if they're not getting, I know we're all doing this just for fun and for free, but it's, if you're not getting people reacting to what you're writing, then I can totally see how for some people that's just not fun anymore.
Yeah, this goes into kind of a larger conversation in a lot of bigger fandom spaces as well, about interaction and about how we view fan fiction. Because I was just reading this earlier, like a Tumblr post about people, when fan fiction shouldn't be viewed that way, it should be viewed as a community piece.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't like that content.
Yeah, a lot of people consume, I feel like this is just based off of like how we consume media today. A lot of the media we consume is very fast paced, very much even how streaming services do, where they release multiple episodes of a TV show at once instead of doing it week by week. A lot of people have become accustomed to consuming at a very fast pace. So things like fan fiction inherently are meant to be slow paced type of releases and a slow paced type of creation. And a lot of people don't view fan fiction in the community aspect because a lot of them are new to fandom, or they've never been in a fan fiction community, or they consume fan fiction outside of the fandom atmosphere. So because of that, they view fan fiction as just content that they are consuming instead of an actual community piece. And because of that, what has happened, this is a consistent problem throughout fandom, by the way, of not commenting and not engaging with fan works. You can find people from 2010 complaining about this, okay? You can Google that and find that. I have no doubts. But when it comes to interactions, a lot of people now are talking about how the change in consumption behavior of a lot of people is what is resulting in a lot of non-engagement on fanfiction, which is frustrating. So that's why a lot of fanfic authors move around. Like some of the biggest BTS fanfic authors, spoiler, a lot of them used to write for really big anime fandoms. Myself right now, I used to write for the My Hero Academia fandom. And I wrote a lot of fan fiction, but then I didn't like writing fan fiction that anymore. So then I retired. When I retired, I didn't write fan fiction anymore. I wasn't doing anything. And then I came back and I was like, oh, I'm in this new fandom. Now I want to write fan fiction for this fandom instead.
Right.
So people change over time with their fandom and their fanfics. And I think that we just have to accept that, team. Even though it is a reflection of the change of behaviors in ARMY itself and how ARMY is becoming anti-creative.
I don't think there's a kind of about it. I think ARMY is becoming anti-creative. At least certain very vocal subsets of ARMY. We don't need to paint ARMY as a broad brush, but it's interesting because like when the AO3 ship stats discourse, when I saw some of it on the timeline or whatever, there was a post about, it was the post that was like, I just don't see creative stuff on the timeline anymore. I just don't see people doing fic threads. And they were just saying that just don't see it anymore. And then other people were like, it's still there. You're just not curating your timeline right. And other people are like, yeah, it's so horrible. It's all gone now. And it's just so funny to me because, yeah, I don't see a ton of it on my regular Stan account, but on my fanfic account where I'm specifically only in community with other fic writers, of course that's all I'm seeing. And I know it's still there, it still exists. It maybe not as much and not as fast a pace as it used to be, but there's still fics that are being released on schedules, big names, lots of people engaging. And it's interesting because it's all there. It's just not, it's being suppressed, maybe isn't the right word, but it's a separate community. It's a completely separate community now. They're not engaging in any of the other discourse.
Yeah, I heavily agree. The fanfiction community is very much its own sub-community in ARMY now. It's not tied with the quote-unquote main community or the average timeline that you get when you first enter ARMY. Yeah. Fanfiction is not part of that anymore. Which is sad in some aspects, as I feel like fan fiction and fan works are integral to a fandom experience, but that's just my opinion. Even though I want to say it's right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that I was always careful about keeping my fan creative consumption and interests separate from my main fan account because I was sensitive to the fact that not everyone likes the same stuff as me. I've always been hyper aware of my audience on my main fan account, and I always kept those things separate very intentionally. I don't think that's true of most people. I think most people just have the one account that they interact with fandom stuff on, so that's like kind of a separate issue. But I do think it's interesting because like we saw this, there was an incident where one of the translators, I'm not going to name them, I'm going to be super vague, but one of the translators posted about reading a fanfic. And I don't know if they originally had meant to post it on their translation account or if they meant to be on private, and then they just went with it because they had already posted it and people were responding. Anyways, they had vague posted about a fic they started reading, and then it like the fic took a turn and they were like, it was not what they were expecting it to be. And then people were like, whoa, that's NSFW content. People got really upset, and then the whole thing got deleted. And I just think it's really interesting the ways in which, and that this was a while ago, this was a few months ago. I feel like things have taken a turn since then in terms of in the general timeline, the general ARMY space, whatever that looks like for people. I don't know anymore because mine is not normal anymore. But I feel like we were just discussing this idea of what an RPF is and like how there's these layers of the BTS personas and caricatures and archetypes and all this stuff. And I feel like there has been a stripping away of all the creative layers that are the BTS personas and been this hyper emphasis on BTS as real people. And I feel like in doing that, we've stripped them of some of the protective layers that they had created with these personas. And so now all of a sudden it's very much like about them as people. And so then any mention of creative stuff or creative imaginings or alternate envisionings, all of that becomes attacks on them because it's becoming about their real selves. Anyway, this is just me theorizing, but it's just like an interesting thing I've seen because as we've been dealing with all the layers of different social activism and social justice oriented posts and stuff, it's often come back to like, how is this going to impact them as real people? What is this like for them as real people? What are we doing to them as real people? There's been this like interesting guilt factor built into some of that. And especially when people are trying to undermine pro-Palestine movement and things like that, I think that it's been a kind of a natural then evolution or iteration of those arguments to then say, look at these creatives, what are they doing to BTS as real people when it was never really about BTS as real people in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way because we can talk more about the creative works. A lot of times people don't like how people depict BTS in works. For example, I'm going to talk about this, be really vague as well. There is a fan artist who, there was a picture of Namjoon with his back, and then he's at the ocean, right? And he's shirtless. And that artist drew him nude in front of the ocean. And a lot of people thought it was really inappropriate for them to draw that. When from an art perspective, it's they're not sexualizing the figure in any type of way. It's more, oh, that's fun. I'm the type of person where I'm fine with nude art. I'm fine with nude statues, nude imagery. So it's interesting to see people have such a averse reaction towards someone drawing a BTS member nude, especially in a non-sexual context. This is completely not sexual.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's getting me is if you want to get upset about something, I can point you to some really controversial fan art. If you want to be upset about things like that, feels like a weird line to draw to me.
Yeah, but like when this person is as well as we're talking about this, the person when they depicted Namjoon as nude, it wasn't like a bad thing. It was just like a creative expression, like output thing, which a lot of people might disagree with. But fundamentally, this person was not trying to harm like Namjoon as a person in any type of way. And it's not like they're trying to strip him of his humanity or make fun of him. It's just like a cheeky, fun thing.
Yeah.
It's like when people draw the BTS members and they give them freckles, or draw the BTS members and give them bandages on their face, or do cute little things, do little emojis on there. It's all a creative type of thing. And I don't know, harassing people about that, it limits creativity, it harms people's actual expression. I talked about this with Kate once. I created a fan edit which used sniper targets. And it was meant to be like a political piece because I did a whole line of fan edits, like photo fan edits, where it's like BTS in the palette of Palestine, and then uses green, red, and black in different creative ways. And I was going to post a fan edit that I created, which has sniper targets all over it. But then I was thinking about it, I was like, I feel like if I post this on here, people would send me death threats over this.
Yeah. Or like, or they'd report you for threatening BTS.
Yeah, when inherently that work would not be like me wanting to harm BTS anyway. It'd be talking about how BTS are targeted as people. And targeted as artists, and how that relates to the Palestinian experience as well, and just the marginalized and displaced experience of being targeted.
Yeah.
And that's what the piece was meant to represent. But I could see how people misconstrue that and try to harm me, even though my intentions were to not harm BTS and more have a conversation of targeting as displaced people.
Yeah, I feel like there's a sentiment of people not critically thinking about the content that they're consuming in general, but also I think specifically because the volatile nature of the Army Twitter space right now, people are not reading media or text in good faith in a way that gives people grace and room to give people the benefit of the doubt, or like to try to understand from the other person's perspective. There's a lot of both unintentional but intentional like misinterpretation of people's words and media. And I think you're right. That is where we're at right now, is that people would only read that badly, and that there's no room for creative interpretation here at all.
Yeah. And then if they misread it in any type of way, it's my fault that they misinterpreted it.
Yeah.
And they would expect an apology from me for not being clear enough in my art. That's exactly what would happen. So I didn't post that one, which I'm really sad about, because I feel like that type of artwork, inherently, I'm an artist. I feel like a lot of people would notice about me, but I came into fandom as a fan artist. And I don't share a lot of my art because I don't want people to know my fandom past, and they might recognize my fan art style, which could be awkward. But other than that, and fundamentally a lot of my fandom work and a lot of my experience of fandom has been rooted in art and being a fan artist and being a fanfic author and doing artistic things. So it's really sad that I can't share that type of thing in this space, because it's so fundamental to me as a fan.
Yeah.
So it feels like stifling.
Yeah, no, I 110% feel this exact same way. I literally started as an army doing video edits. Like I started with doing edits, and I do my own music remixing, and I do my own, and it's all in a fan way, right? And it's all, I don't know. And then of course I write a ton of fan fiction and stuff. I just feel these are things that I do for myself, but I cannot do it in community right now. Well, I do the fan fiction in community because that's the only way I could imagine doing fan fiction, but I do that separately, quietly, by myself, away from my main account. Anyway, but I feel this in my soul, just like this, like stifling the creative. I think this is why I ultimately got so frustrated with the conversations, especially around streaming and stuff. This is the only way you can show your love to BTS. And I'm like, how sad for you that you sitting there and streaming music and spending money is the only way you are capable of showing love. That is so sad, like really sad. And it's just, for me, I pour a lot of energy and love into things that I would like my community to see, because I know at least the community I'm a part of would probably appreciate it, but I'm not going to do a lot of that publicly because, again, there's just a lot of stifling and a lot of policing going on, and it's not nice.
Yeah, it's not nice at all, because I feel like the community could work through so much of the emotional trauma of existence right now, and having to mourn tens of thousands of Palestinian people who have died, mourning just their futures, mourning what we could have had as a community, mourning for each other and each other's families. Like a lot of Palestinian armies, a lot of their family members have passed away, and we don't have time to mourn sometimes. And I feel like if we had creative outlets, if we had space to talk about as a community, we could do a lot more mourning to actually help process these things. But we really can't right now. Yeah. And it makes me sad, because I feel like I have a lot of edits I just don't post. A lot of really provocative edits. I use hagium a lot when editing because there's a lot of gun imagery in there and a lot of imagery of violence. And I think there's a very interesting conversation to have around just the August D series and around violence and around cycles of violence. And I feel like the best way for me to talk about that is through art. But it makes me sad because a lot of times I feel like if I posted this, people would think I'm saying to harm a member or something. when fundamentally I'm not. I posted this one edit of, it's the one where Yoongi's in the bathtub and he's getting shot by the other Augustine, and he's like looking straight towards the camera and then the guns to his head on the side. And even posting that one, I was like, is someone gonna misinterpret this? Even though it's literally a screenshot from the music video itself, is someone going to misinterpret this to say I'm trying to hurt him?
I mean, when you've got people reporting posts of fan letters, whatever, on Weverse that are literally just BTS lyrics, and people are reporting those because they're being construed as pro-Palestinian and quote unquote harassing BTS, then yeah, I can see how one might want to double think before they post anything online right now.
Yeah, and that makes me sad, honestly, because I feel like there could be so much conversation we could be having.
Yeah.
But just the policing happening in the fandom right now is really harmful. We're talking about creatives right now, but also just harmful for just any type of fan in the space. There should be no one way to be a fan. I talked about Critics United with Kate recently. And a lot of you may not know what Critics United is. It was basically a fan group on fanfiction.net, which is a fanfiction website. And Critics United were basically a group of people who went around harassing authors who they thought wrote bad fanfiction, quote unquote bad fanfiction, based on arbitrary guidelines and rules. And they went around, they harassed authors who they thought wrote bad fanfiction. And Critics United is not a new type of idea. It's very old. The original Critics United I'm talking about, they were created early 2010s, late 2000s. And there's still groups of people like that today who go around harassing people who they think write quote unquote bad fan fiction. And policing in fandom is not a new thing, but it's sad to see. I feel because ARMY is really disconnected from main fandom discourse as well. Not main fandom, but like bigger fandom discourse. We don't get to learn from a lot of fandom past that already has figured out a lot of this and have had conversations about this. And because of that, today we're still struggling to work through a lot of problems that a lot of other fandoms already figured out, which makes it really sad because ARMY could benefit a lot from larger fandom discourse within the space, from knowing about the history of things like Archive of Our Own and of the organization of transformative works and why those things exist and why we have those things. Like, why does AO3 fight so hard for the right for fanfiction to exist? Because fanfiction existing helps all the rest of fandom existing. Fanfiction being able to exist allows you to use copyrighted images in your profile pictures, allows you to make cute little edits, allows you to actually talk about different media and content without getting sued. Fanfiction is one of the main barriers protecting fandom itself. And I think a lot of ARMYs don't know that because they've never interacted with that type of discourse at all. And because of that, they see fanfiction as a bad thing. They, berate fanfiction. But inherently, that's still so harmful to fandom itself. And with Kate, we were talking about this before as well, like how driving out creatives is a really bad thing and how, in the context of play as well, like the life cycle of the fandom.
Yeah, no, I was saying that my big thesis, if you will, for a lot of my research that I do is that for communities, and I'm especially thinking, this could be true of any community, but I'm especially thinking of kind of these online disparate, they're all spread apart from each other. We've got like ARMY is a great example because it's very global. There's people from all over, they're online and they're brought together in this context. And my thesis around this has been that for community to thrive, one of the kind of the key foundational things, and this has been true of ARMY, and I think this is true of fandom in general, but not just fandom, like this could be true of other communities too. But anyway, one of the key kind of foundational aspects is play. So people coming together, doing things playfully, having a good time, the ability to disconnect from other parts of your life, the ability to relax. There's like these things where when you creates this magic sauce where people can then let their guard down a little bit, be a little bit more vulnerable about themselves. And that's how connection and relationships are built. And so I have this kind of running thesis about how play is an important aspect of all that, and how play is an important part of maintaining friendships inside your community, and then therefore maintaining the community itself, because a community is just a bunch of relationships of people with each other. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, especially in the context of what's been happening to Army, especially on Twitter and the Army Twitter community. Thinking a lot about how we, in the effort to, how do I want to put this? Basically, we've lost a lot of the ability and the context around being able to play. And I think that there's a lot more to be said here, and I'll probably say it at some point. I'm definitely going to write about it at some point. And I don't want to say this and have people think, oh, if you're doing social justice work and activism work, then obviously those are the people that have ruined the play because they brought all this serious stuff into our business. And that is not at all the case. That's not where I'm going with this. I think you can still do social justice and have play. You can still be doing activist work and still have your playful connections with your community. I think that the part that I'm thinking about where the play has really fallen apart, and the reason we're not seeing nearly as much play in general, is the rift between various communities and varying opinions about how we should operate as a community. The rift has become one that has become quite violent and quite toxic and horrible. And all of that makes play completely inaccessible. Like, we can't play if we're feeling like we're about to get attacked. And I think also what I've seen is that kind of this, and I alluded to this earlier in this podcast, is what one of the first things I saw when we got pushback against the pro-Palestine movement was people telling me that, and this was like what, January, February, when I was writing about this, like when I first was getting canceled for this and stuff, is people were saying, oh, that's not the correct way to love BTS. The only way to love BTS is this, and this being streaming and buying. And that is where the play really starts to break down, is when they're telling us we can't be creative, we can't do these other activities because those don't count, in quotes, those don't count as being Army anymore. There's only one correct way to be an Army, and there's no creative energy behind it. All of that is where we really start to lose the play. And so then what we've seen is this kind of bolstering on both sides of people having to be more militant, about their own convictions because the other side has been so violent. Anyway, so that's the long ramble of why I feel like we all feel like we're losing community, and a lot of that has to do with we don't have any playful aspects left. And I think a lot of that we're seeing with kind of the undermining of creatives, and the not just undermining and policing, but also under appreciation. So I still see people posting fan art, and I do my best to like it and give engagement, because I feel like, as somebody who has been doing fiction writing, like I said, I feel like I still want to feel connected, and it's hard to know if I'm just putting my creative energy out to avoid or what.
About that as well. I wanted to talk about expectations of fan labor, because I feel like now we're going through this change in how we're viewing fan labor. We had a previous episode where we talked about fan labor on this podcast, and fan labor, even though it's labor, it should still be fulfilling. You shouldn't be expected to do fan labor. Fan labor is a thing very much done out of love. When I talk about fan labor, I think a lot about petitions to renew TV shows. I think about things like fandom trumps hate, where fanfic authors are coming together to raise money for different causes. And a lot of that fan labor is very fulfilling labor. It's meant to be supportive, right? Even streaming, I still think, is very meaningful fan labor for a lot of people. But just the way that people have expected more and more fan labor out of armies, and how a lot of armies who do streaming fan labor, they degrade different types of fan labor, like writing fan fiction and creating fan art, it makes me really sad because fandom should never have one type of fan labor. In order to participate in fandom, it should not be a requirement to do labor.
Yeah, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. We talked about this in episodes before in season 1, right? Before all of this other stuff has come out to light, has been happening. Because I've definitely said it on Twitter, and that might have actually also been part of the thread where I was getting canceled for the first time over this stuff. But a person who's been like, hey, how's your experience been? I've literally been out there asking people, getting to know people in the community, learning lots of different experiences that people have been having. And one of the things that people were consistently telling me years ago, this was like what, 2 years ago or whatever, that a lot of them were like, I'm taking a step back from the community, or I don't talk a lot with other people on the timeline and stuff because I feel really guilty because I'm not doing it right. And feeling like if they don't stream X number of hours, they don't do whatever, then they're not doing army right. And there was a lot of guilt. And we talked about this, I think, in our ableism episode, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But anyways, go check those out. Those were great episodes. But to summarize, there's always been this feeling of pressure, and I think we saw that last summer when people were like trying to boycott specific songs because of the collaborations on them, even before this push for anti-Zionism and stuff. But we saw the pushback of, oh, you must stream. Like that was why I got canceled last summer, was saying there's an alternate version that isn't triggering for people. Go listen to that one if you're triggered. And the overwhelming guilt that people put on others for not doing fandoming correctly. So it's always been there. This is not a new thing. I think that it's just been really hard recently because the folks that feel that way have doubled down, and it's become much more violent in their reactions if you speak out against certain, it's not even against, it's just, I don't care if you stream, if that's how you want to fan, go fan that way, that's fine, but you don't get to dictate to me how I'm a fan, right? Like that's not how this works. Like we're a community, we're a diverse community. People say this ad nauseum that army is not a monolith, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember, that everybody's going to express their love differently and express their own idea of what their community is differently. And I think that this dictating how other people should operate, it's counter to the community experience.
Yeah, it definitely is, because the way streaming has been packaged and then marketed to army is that it's an anti-racism tool, which is true in some aspects. BTS are discriminated against, and the rules of the charts change whenever BTS accomplish something on the charts. We saw this happen with like Crazy. We saw this happen with Golden. We saw this happen with Butter and Dynamite. We saw this happen with so many different releases. And every time armies are able to game the system and to prevail despite these barriers the music industry puts up is so powerful. But also, it's really sad that every time we try to show appreciation towards BTS and to love them through streaming or through buying their music, that gets harmed and then disapproved of by the Western music industry. It's like a never-ending battle. I remember when I was still involved with streaming and funding spaces that we would constantly be changing our tactics and trying to figure out how we can best support BTS. And at a certain point, I looked around and I was like, basically every comeback, there's like a new thing we have to do, or like an old thing we couldn't do, but now we can do now. There was, for one of the releases, I believe it was 7, where we thought for a while on Apple iTunes that music videos didn't count for charting. But then all of a sudden they started accounting for charting. So now we had to budget money to buy music videos alongside the actual songs, like the MP3s of the songs. So it's so demoralizing to constantly having to be fighting against that. And I think a lot of streaming armies and funder armies, they're stuck in this forever fight against the music industry. And instead of thinking, okay, like, how can we support BTS in a more manageable way that doesn't have us burning out every single time we're trying to fund and buy and stream, and doesn't have us harming ourselves? There are people that I was working with that were going like 24-hour days every single time a comeback came around. And I'm like, this is not sustainable. This is not healthy. We cannot keep doing this. And instead of any change happening, a lot of people just got rid of me.
Sorry. Shouldn't laugh.
Wow, you're laughing. You're so cruel.
It's like a hysterical, what are we even doing as human beings laugh. Really.
Yeah, because I understand that streaming and buying and funding, those are ways to fight against the racism of the Western music industry. But also, it feels like temporary fixes, like temporary attempts to fight against racism, instead of thinking of systemically, how do we fight this? Because, for example, when we're talking about advocacy work, right? Protesting, right? Protesting is a very immediate action you can do. It's a very immediate physical action that you do that is temporary. So you're not going to be outside a building forever. You're doing this to do some type of meaningful thing, right? But in order to codify things into law, in order to ensure things are within the actual books, that's a long haul. That's like years of advocacy work, of law work, of legislative work that takes decades. We context this in the fight for gay marriage. That was a decades-long fight that required delegalizing a lot of things before you could legalize gay marriage. They had to delegalize having gay sex in your own home first before we could even get to legalizing gay marriage. So there was a lot of steps that contributed to that. And with how armies are thinking about the music industry now, I still think that we can't do this forever. We cannot stream and buy and fund forever. There's not an infinite money pool we can pull from to do that forever. And every comeback, I think I just became more disillusioned with it because there wasn't any actual tangible change happening. It was just us having to scramble every single time. So now, you know what I do? I fight against the music industry through bureaucracy, through academic work. I talk about it whenever I go to a conference with someone. I talk about it with people involved in student government, people involved who are going into the music industry, people who are in the music industry already, because we need systemic change. We can't just keep fighting it every single time with different methods every single time. It's not sustainable. It's not going to actually change the fundamental structure of the music industry. Because instead of accepting that the music industry is racist and that we just have to find different tactics to fight against that, we should actually try to change the music industry itself instead of accepting its racism. So with all of that and what we've talked about and we've thought about, what's your final thoughts, Kate?
Final thoughts. I think that I've been thinking a lot about, in general, been thinking a lot about where I'm situated, who's my community, what am I doing here? And I'm still thinking about that, TBD. But I think that it's felt like I've lost a lot of people. Every week I have a friend or somebody who, even people I haven't heard from a while, but people who were friends who are like, yeah, I can't be your friend anymore because of XYZ. And I feel like there's been a lot of reconfiguration of what and who is in my community specific. And I'm sure other people have been experiencing this as well. But I do think that in that, I've been thinking a lot about the things we just discussed in this episode about creatives and about what do I find joy in? What is important to me as part of my community fan experience? And I think it's okay to lean into that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, a lot of this, I'm like mourning the reconfiguration of the community, but also leaning into these new spaces. And I think what's important to remember is there's still community there. We still have community. We still have people. They just, some of them are new and some people are gone, people have arrived, whatever. And the other thing I was going to say is that yeah, that we should all be thinking about what is giving us joy, what is making us feel fulfilled. Beyond that, how are we maintaining our own integrity as people? And I think that's been something that's been discussed a lot of, I have convictions, I have moral values that I think are important to me that I don't want to compromise. And so a lot of this has been like, I'm not going to compromise my integrity for whatever the thing is. And so, yeah. So anyway, so the point is I've been doing a lot of fiction writing. I've been leaning into a lot of those communities because I'm still finding community there. And I think that it's important for everyone else to also be thinking about what that looks like for them.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I've lost a lot of friends and lost a lot of community. I'm no longer part of the streaming and funding community, which was a very integral part of my BTS Army community, and I've been in for a long time in the community and in the fandom. And it's really sad to leave those people, but a lot of those people wanted me and expected me to compromise my morals in order to stay in those spaces. And they wanted me to essentially, it was strange because it's like these people were pro-Palestine and I guess are pro-Palestine in some ways, but then they don't want to center Palestinians and the Palestinian experience and the Palestinian want for revolution and want for change. And I think that just was it for me, which is really sad because these are people I've known for a long time and who I've cared about and who I still care about, and I wish the best for them. But it's like, for me to stay in those spaces, they wanted me to be a certain way, and that was just not me. So now I found different people. And what I've been doing as well as Kate, like leaning into creative works, I've also leaned into my IRL friends more. And also, because I tell my IRL friends about what happens to me on Army Twitter, and they're baffled. They can't even conceive that. Okay, they're like, okay, so people don't want to support you guys because they think you're bothering and harassing BTS. And I'm like, yeah, when you say it that way, it does seem a little ridiculous.
Just a little.
Just a little. And I think that's everything, though. I've also expanded my work into other fandoms and just talking in fandom general as well, like bigger fandom spaces. And just being able to have perspective is so important.
And you know what gives perspective? Consuming creative works, engaging in creative work. What? Wow, full circle. Brought that episode together.
Full circle moment.
Woo.
So yeah, with that, we come to the end of this episode. We have a lot of work to do, Kate, because we have to work on, maybe something's coming out. We don't know. An article?
Oh,
we don't know.
Yeah.
Multiple articles?
Oh.
A paper or two?
Or three.
Or three or more. How many are we submitting? We're submitting like...
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, let's not talk about that. Anyway, but sending many good feelings. Yeah, stay tuned. Anyway, sending many good feelings out into the world to all of you. Sending many good feelings, sending many good wishes. Hope you all are well if you're listening to this. And yeah, just take care of yourselves. Engage with something creative, make something creative, read, write, watch something creative. And wish you all the best. Just take care. Yeah, that's it. Bye.
Bye.